Now, today, Matt, we're talking about the tax position of sovereign wealth funds. Now, to me, a sovereign wealth fund comes in many different forms. Well, one common feature they have is that they enjoy a particular tax status in their home jurisdiction, usually an exemption from tax on income on gains. Now, that's in their home jurisdiction. We obviously also come across them where they invest internationally outside their home jurisdiction. What are the typical issues you find?
I think there's two main issues. One is it's right to say that sovereign bodies are quite often exempt both in their own jurisdiction, but also as a matter of international law, they're quite often exempt internationally, depending on what they're doing. And so that is one issue. The other one is the question of how the jurisdiction that the investment's being made in perceives that investment and the fact that it is being treated as tax exempt. And for those reasons, amongst many others, you'll quite often see an investment by a sovereign wealth fund being made through some kind of taxable or blocker investment vehicle that is treated much more like a regular taxable investment structure. And we also see this with tax-exempt investors in the US or pension funds around the world, where they're exempt at home, but actually when they're making investments overseas, they will quite often invest through a taxable structure.
And there are particular issues, I know, because we've discussed them at length in the past, in relation to investment in land-rich projects. Perhaps you could expand a bit on that.
Well, that's right, because particularly where you have investments in infrastructure projects, in mines, in renewable energy projects, or purely in real estate, what you'll find is that the country where that investment is located will have special rules trying to make sure that an appropriate amount of tax is being paid in the country where the land or the project is located, to make sure that that country is getting its appropriate share of the tax. And so that's a scenario where you'd expect a sovereign wealth fund or other exempt investor to be coming in through a suitable investment vehicle for that type of investment in that jurisdiction.
And a lot of people particularly in our world, the tax world, spend a lot of time discussing the impact of Pillar 2. Perhaps for a non-tax person, you could just give us a brief introduction into what Pillar 2 is and how it might impact a sovereign wealth fund.
Okay, so Pillar 2 is you may have heard of it as the global minimum tax rules. They apply to large multinational companies, and they're aimed at trying to bring a 15% minimum rate of tax in all jurisdictions in which a multinational operates. And it's part of a wider range of measures, largely made by the OECD, that are looking at trying to avoid profits being shifted around the world to lower tax regimes. The Pillar 2 in particular, the global minimum tax, it applies to large multinationals, and that's really a consolidation test. So that's looking at groups with more than 750 million euros of turnover. Often investment structures will look at each separate investment as its own consolidated section. So you may find that a sovereign wealth fund investor may be able to structure investments such that they don't fall within the ambit of these rules, because each investment is looked at separately. But if that's not the case, then you would expect that they will be very much subject to those rules in the same way as anyone else, where what you're investing in is ultimately a commercial activity.